Definitely when I first read them, I was taken aback. I was like, oh, that's a totally different way of thinking about that. That's the title of the talk. And I'm not suggesting that this is the way we should think about these things. I think it's a good thing to say, hey, you know, what if we thought about this way, and maybe this is another way of thinking about something. So this is the book. Unspoken Sermons. I think they should have used this picture instead, because again, the beard is more clear there. This man he didn't start out just writing theological stuff. He was in training to be a minister. I don't remember what church, some weird named churches in Scotland. Actually, I think at this time he was in London. But he was a mentor to Lewis Carroll, you know, Alice in Wonderland. And in fact, it was because of him that Lewis Carroll published Alice in Wonderland. He convinced him to publish it. Yeah, he was his like direct mentor. He had 11 kids, or wife, I know. And the kids enjoyed reading these stories, and so that's what convinced him to publish Alice in Wonderland. And C.S. Lewis, actually, whom many of you probably have read, was greatly inspired by George MacDonald. So I actually want to read a quote that C.S. Lewis, from one of C.S. Lewis's, what C.S. Lewis wrote in an introduction about George MacDonald. He wrote, I guess I'll read it here. This collection, this is from C.S. Lewis, and I just love this writing, so I put the whole quote in there. He wrote, "This collection, as I have said, was designed not to revive MacDonald's literary reputation, but to spread his religious teaching." Oh, yes, sir. Hence, most of my extracts are taken from the 3 volumes of Unspoken Sermons. That's going to not make any sense on the live stream, what I just said there. My own debt to this book is almost as great as one man can owe to another. All right, so that, to me, those are big words. When I read that C.S. Lewis said this about him, my own debt to this book is almost as great as one man can owe to another. And nearly all serious inquirers to whom I have introduced it acknowledge that it has given them great help, sometimes indispensable help, toward the very acceptance of the Christian faith. Those are big words. I know hardly any other writer, says C.S. Lewis, who seems to be closer or more continually close to the spirit of Christ himself. Hence his Christ-like union of tenderness and severity. Tenderness and severity. Nowhere else outside the New Testament have I found terror and comfort so intertwined. In making this collection, I was discharging a debt of justice. I have never concealed the fact that I regarded him, MacDonald, as my master. Indeed, I fancy I have never written a book, C.S. Lewis says, in which I did not quote from him. But it has not seemed to me that those who have received my books kindly take even now sufficient notice of the affiliation. Honesty drives me to emphasize it. So he wrote this to say, I like this guy. All right, so hopefully we do too. We're going to talk about 3 kind of points. Now, obviously this is a well-worn book. I've highlighted it and written all over it. It's a series of just individual sermons that aren't in any kind of order on, you know, various topics: prayer, justice, mercy, whatever, you know. So these are just 3 points kind of gathered from a few of the sermons. So we're going to talk tonight about whether the Bible is the Word of God. You're already thinking, raised eyebrow. We're going to talk about a different meditation on the wedding at Cana. And we're going to talk about what's called the Eloi, right? This sentence spoken by Jesus, one of the 7 things he said before he gave up the ghost on the cross. So MacDonald says this, and then from now on, these will all be quotes from this book. And on the bottom right, I've referred to which sermon of the sermons of this book that it came from. Sad indeed, he says, would the whole matter be if the Bible had told us everything God meant us to believe. Okay, but herein is the Bible itself greatly wronged. It nowhere lays claim to be regarded as the Word, the way, the truth, the life, right? So what is the way, the truth, the life? Who is the way, the truth, and life? That's Jesus. So the Bible leads us to Jesus. And I've heard this analogy before. Hey, ladies, do you want to come move up a little? They don't know I'm talking to them. Can you move up so I can see you? There's this pillar here that makes it hard for me to see you. I'm sorry. That's annoying, I know, when the speaker calls you out. But so he makes this analogy, and I've heard it before, actually. He says, perhaps we can consider the Bible like the moon, all right? The moon is our only light. Oh, that's so sweet. The moon is our only light in the darkness, okay? The moon lights up the darkness of the night. But the moon doesn't itself make light, right? It is not a source of light. It reflects light. It reflects the light of the sun. So he analogizes that and says the sun, S-U-N, is like S-O-N, right, is Christ. And his light shines, and we get that light in the darkness through the Bible. So the Bible's very important. He's not, negating its role. But he's saying sometimes we sort of worship the Bible instead of the person, Christ, right? What should I think, he says, of my child if I found that he limited his faith in me and hope from me to the few promises he had heard me utter? So if my child only considers what I've promised him, only what he's actually heard me say, literally, if that's all he knows about me, that's not great, right? Those who rest in such a faith would feel yet more comfortable if they had God's bond instead of his word, which they regard not as the outcome of his character, but as a pledge of his honor. He's saying some people would prefer to have, God's promises than his character. Do you count it a great faith to believe what God has said? To believe what he has not said is faith indeed, and blessed, for that comes of believing in him. So again, he's making the point that the Bible's role is to point us to God, is to reveal God, that it is not by itself sufficient to reveal God to us, right? There are other ways in which God is revealed to us, and it is not the object of our praise. What it points to is. If you believed in God, you would find it easy to believe the word. You would not even need to inquire whether he had said it. You would know that he meant it. So he's arguing we should use the Bible to see what God said, and then get to know him, and then we know him, not just what he said. All right, so hopefully that didn't ruffle too many feathers. I'd love your thoughts on these things. Anyone who has thoughts, go ahead and voice them. All right, so now he has a really lovely way of talking about the wedding at Cana. So what's the story about? You have a question? Yeah. Yeah. So Miriam asked, how are we going to find out about God? Yes, through Scripture, among other things, right? As Orthodox people, we actually think there are many ways that God is revealed to us, right? Scripture being perhaps the most important one. But yeah, absolutely is how we find out about God, but it's not how we have a relationship with him, right? That's more. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And he would say, he's very familiar with Scripture. It's very important to him, but he's saying, I think, that sometimes we make that the object of our relationship instead of the person. So what's this story about, the wedding? Someone talk me through it, the main points, wedding at Cana. What happens? They go to a wedding. I made it easy for you. Then what happens? They run out of wine, which is a crying shame, I agree. And I'm a mess. And then they run out of wine, and then what happens? So she says, and this is important, his mother tells Jesus, they ran out of wine. We ran out of wine. Does she ask him for anything? She says, they ran out of wine. And he says, what do you want from me? Right? That's hard to read sometimes. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that. And then what does he say? My hour has not yet come, right? And then what does she say? Does she say anything back to him? Oh, no, please, no. No, she doesn't say anything. Maybe she did, right? But whoever wrote this down, I mean, I think it's in at least 2 of the Gospels, I think. Actually, I don't remember. But maybe she did say something, but we don't know if she said anything. All we know she said was to the servants, go do what he tells you, which is also odd, right? All right. So what does MacDonald have to say about this? Well, before we do that, what have you heard about this exchange between Jesus and Mary? It's odd. It's beautiful, right? It's cool. I love, who's seen The Chosen? Yeah. Have you seen that, the depiction of this in The Chosen? It's really well done. I like the way they did it. It's also a very nice meditation about, in The Chosen, they've embellished it. Like, these are really good old friends of Mary's. They're trying to impress the in-laws, with money, who have money and who are kind of stuck up. And so they've embellished, right? They've just added a bunch of story that, wasn't there, but it's a nice, it adds a nice kind of background context. So what have you heard about this exchange? What are your thoughts on it before we talk about what MacDonald thinks? Okay.
So when she was serving with them, she realized the wine is almost gone.
Is gone, yeah.
So shows that the spirit of service, I guess.
Okay, I like that. So what Tony says is Mary wouldn't have known that the wine was gone if she wasn't helping, involved, serving. So it speaks to her as a woman of service. Nice, I hadn't heard that actually. I like that, and that's true. It must be true, yeah. What else? What have you heard about the exchange? Yeah, Mary. Yeah, so she doesn't ask him directly, at least is not recorded that she asked him directly what to do. She just says, here's a problem. And I've heard that too. Who else has heard something like that? So what have you heard about him saying, my hour has not yet come? Why did he say that then? Was he kidding? Well, let's eliminate some possibilities. Did he not know what was about to happen? He knew. All right. So why would he say that? Why would he say, my hour has not yet come? Okay. Anyone have a thought before yeah. So he didn't want to do it. And does anyone have a problem with thinking that? I don't have a problem with that. And in fact, that's kind of, you hit the nail on the head, I think. That's George MacDonald's point here. He wasn't planning on doing it. It was not, we could say, his will to do it. In a way. Obviously, in a way, it was his will because he did it, right? So there's something about God's will here, and there's something about intercessory prayer. There's something about prayer here that we need to talk about. All right. So the first thing George MacDonald says about it, and this has nothing to do with the point he's making. I just thought it was beautiful. It was just a lovely meditation. He says, poor indeed was the making of the wine that Jesus, this miracle, poor indeed was the making of the wine in the earthen pots of stone, compared with its making in the lovely growth of the vine with its clusters of swelling grapes. So we marvel at this miracle. And in The Chosen, the people were just like, oh, right? He made wine out of water. But his point is, he's the one who made the grapes, everybody. Like, that's even more of a miracle, which is, I think, a nice meditation. So what's this story about? The regard of our Lord, says George MacDonald, to a wish of his mother. Alas, how differently the tale is often received, how misunderstood this story is, he says. His mother asks, and he tells her that he and she have different outlooks, different notions of his work. He said, my hour is not yet come, but there was that in his look and tone whence she knew that her desire was granted. Something, and in The Chosen they do this really nicely. She says, they're out of wine. He says, what do you want from me? My hour's not yet come. And then she looks at them and says, go do what he says. In that moment, he smiles. And he has this kind of mischievous look. It's actually really, it's wonderful. I imagine that what really happened probably was something like that. Or maybe there was more of a dialogue that just wasn't written down. We don't know. But maybe it was like that, right? Maybe it was something about his look, and this is her son, and she knows him. Maybe there was something in his look that said, yeah, he's going to do it. And so she smiles and tells them to go. Okay. So let's talk about the fact that what she did was pray, right? This was a prayer. What am I thence to conclude, worth of the Son of God and the Son of Mary, but that at the prayer of his mother he made room in his plans for the thing she desired. It was not his wish then to work a miracle, but if his mother wished it, he would. Do we have a problem with that? I've certainly grown up thinking, well, God knows everything. God has a will. We can't, he doesn't change his mind. Our prayers don't make him do something he wasn't going to do. He just, he already knows we're going to pray for it anyway, right? Those sorts of things. His argument here is no, he wasn't going to do it. He really wasn't going to do it. But she prayed and he did. So are we okay thinking that? Let's keep going. Not always did he do as his mother would have him, but this was a case, and this is important, in which he could do so, for it wouldn't interfere, this is Old English, it wouldn't interfere with the will of his father. If it would have hurt his mother, if it had been in any way turning from the will of his Father in heaven, he wouldn't have done it. So there's a way in which it is consistent with the will of the Father. It's not inconsistent with the will of the Father, so it was there was some play, right? There was some play. His yielding to her, and that's what it seems like he did, makes the story doubly precious to my heart, says MacDonald. The son could then change his intent and spoil nothing. So I say, can the Father, for the Son does nothing but what he sees the Father do. All right. So he goes on because he anticipates objections to this, right? People are going to go nuts. God doesn't change his mind. He can't change his mind. Our prayers cannot make him change his mind. How should any design, he says, of the all-wise be altered in response to prayer of ours? Such objection springs from poorest idea of God in relation to us. It supposes him to have cares and plans and intentions concerning our part of creation, irrespective of us. He lays no plans, MacDonald says, irrespective of his children. He sees that space be kept for them. They need room to struggle out of their chrysalis, to undergo the change that comes with the waking will. So his suggestion here is that, yes, God has plans. Yes, he has his divine will, his providential will, but his sovereign will. But maybe he leaves room. He leaves room for us to bumble around, right? To grow, to find our space. Surely, he may keep his plans in a measure unfixed, waiting the free desire of the individual soul. Does he not want us? Did he not design us to pray? How could he then not answer the prayer? Because of the system which has its existence for the sake of prayer. True, in many cases, the prayer, far more than the opportunity of answering it, is God's end. So he's saying what he really wants is for you to pray, not so much that saying yes or no or some other time or whatever. But how will the further end of the prayer be reached, which is oneness between the heart of the child and the heart of the Father? That's the goal of prayer, oneness between the heart of the child and the heart of the Father. How will the child go on to pray if he knows the Father cannot answer him? Will not, maybe, because of love, but how with a self-imposed cannot? How do we continue to pray if we know that God cannot answer our prayer. That God cannot interfere to modify his plans, interfere without the change of a single law of his world is to me absurd, he says. If we can change, God can change, or else we're less free than he's less free than we are. Change his plans, he said, not his principles, not his ends, indeed not himself. God does not change. He's not saying that. But he can leave room in his plans for us. A God that should fail to hear, receive, attend to one single prayer, the feeblest or worst, I cannot believe in. But a God that would grant every request of every man or every company of men would be an evil God. That is no God but a demon. So he says, God has to hear every single prayer, feeble, bad. He has to hear every and attend to and receive every prayer, but he cannot answer every prayer. That would be terrible, right? Because we don't know what we're doing. So this is an exhortation now. He's saying we should ask him, like his mother did, for something that maybe we might say seems silly. They're out of wine. That's what you're going to ask the creator of the universe for? And he's saying, yeah, ask him. He's not afraid of your presumptuous approach to him. It is you who are afraid to come near him. He's not watching over his dignity. It is you who fear to be sent away as the disciples would have sent away the little children. It is you who think so much about your souls and are so afraid of losing your life that you dare not draw near to the life of life, lest it should consume you. So he's like, ask. This reminds me actually of a story. I was at a Wednesday morning liturgy. This was a few years ago at St. Paul. I think I've told this story before. Wow, it's hot up here. I had enough time to get to the liturgy, to go to liturgy, but then I had a meeting with a student at, I think, noon. And the liturgy ends at around 11:15-ish, so I was like, I'm good, got plenty of time. Liturgy went a little late. We talked in Abuna's office for a little while, and then I was about to leave. I was about to go meet my student. And someone stopped me, or no, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in a while, and I was like, hey, how's it going? And he goes, not good. I'm like, oh man, what's wrong? And he started telling me his marriage was like crumbling. I was like, oh man. And we talked for a while. And I didn't notice the time at first. And then at some point I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta go. We were talking for a while. And I kind of like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna be late. But I didn't want to cut him off. So at some point when it felt like I had a moment, I said, listen, I have to go. I have a meeting, but let's talk later, whatever. And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna be late. I had enough time barely to make it to campus. So I drove illegally probably, and then I made it, but at that time of day, like there's no parking, right? You have to get to campus by 8:30 if you want to find a spot anywhere near my office where the building is. So I'm like, all right, there's no way I'm gonna find a spot. So I had this thought, I'm like, God, please help me find a parking spot. And then I got mad at myself. I was like, you're asking him for a parking spot? So, really, like you're asking the all-powerful, mighty, awesome God for a parking spot so that you're not like embarrassed with your student? Because I actually saw, as I was driving by my building, I saw her waiting outside the door, my office. And I was like, please help me find a parking spot. And then I got mad at myself. And then not even kidding, I come around, I'd already gone down a couple rows, and then first spot, this is coming, right? Someone pulls out right in front of me. So I pulled in and started tearing, right? Could it have been a coincidence? I mean, sure, it could have been, right? But I'm a scientist. I think probabilistically, I don't think it was a coincidence. And I remember I was crying not because he gave me a spot, right? He answered this stupid little prayer of mine. And it's because Hanayan. He's so sweet. And just this was this little thing, and he just wanted to show me this love at this moment. Right? How many times have I asked for a parking spot and I haven't gotten it, right? So anyway, I think that's what McDonald is saying here. Like, don't be afraid to ask him for a parking spot. Which isn't to say that he's, the guy who gives you parking spots, but he's your father, right? You're a child, and you should tell him everything, right? Anyway. What if God knows prayer to be the thing that we need first and foremost? What if the main object in God's idea of prayer be the supplying of our endless need, the need of Him? What if the good of all our smaller and lower needs lies in this, that they may drive us to God? And I love this. That's so sweet. Hunger may drive the runaway child home, and he may or may not be fed at once, but he needs his mother more than his dinner. I love that. Hunger may drive the runaway child home, but he needs his mother more than his dinner. And we can say that that's why prayer, or that's one way to think about prayer, right? Maybe we get on our knees because we're hungry, and maybe he'll feed us and maybe he won't, right? He doesn't always. But we need him. That's what we need to be doing. Okay. Is anyone scandalized? You guys seem okay. Nobody's throwing tomatoes at me, probably because you don't have any. This is the Eloi. It's called the Eloi. My God, why have you forsaken me? So McDonald has a take on this that I really, really liked. And again, with all of these things, right, I'm not saying that this is the interpretation. I just think it's a nice way of thinking about some of these things. So let me do the same thing as I did with the wedding at Cana. What have you heard about this? This is a tough statement, right? You read this and you're like, man, Jesus said, why have you forsaken me? To God. Jesus, who is God. What have you heard about this statement? Surely you've heard contemplations. All right. He's showing his humanity. I've heard that too, yeah. So is he actually feeling this way? In his humanity? But his humanity is separated not from his divinity. So, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think he's really feeling this. Okay. But does he think God has forsaken him? Deep inside. I like that. All right, let's hear what McDonald has to say. This is from Matthew 27:46. My God, why have you forsaken me? I love these words. I do not know that I should dare to approach this, says McDonald. Of all utterances into which human breath has ever been molded, did I not feel it contains the deepest practical lesson the human heart has to learn? That's big. Not just is this not a tough statement to read, it has a deep lesson for us, he claims. Okay? And then he waxes poetic. He says, when the smoke of the battle, I'm putting in between Jesus and Satan, rose up, the smoke of the battle, metaphorically, rose up between him and his Father, and for the one terrible moment before he broke the bonds of life, he walked weary and triumphant into his arms. The smoke, he's saying, hid God from the eyes of his Son, which is weird to think about. Jesus is God. Okay, but let's continue with this imagery a little bit. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Never had it been so with him before. Never before had he been unable to see God beside him. Yet never was God nearer him now. For never was Jesus more divine. We see this as a human moment. He's saying, this is a divine moment. How so? He could not see him, He could not feel him. He felt forsaken. I think we can all agree. He felt that way. He felt that sometimes the way we feel. And yet, it is my God that he cries. So, in the moment where he cannot feel him, he feels forsaken, he cannot see him, he knows he's there. And he cries to him. That's the lesson. That is a divine thing. That human part of feeling forsaken is conquered by his divine part that knows he's there. Thus, the will of Jesus, in the very moment when his faith seems about to yield, is finally triumphant. The will has no feeling now to support it. Pure and simple and surrounded by fire, the will declares for God. It was a cry in desolation, but it came out of faith. This is a moment of great faith, actually. And he calls it a divine moment. The divine horror of that moment is unfathomable by human soul. It was blackness of darkness. And yet he would believe. Yet he would hold fast. God was his God yet. Of the peace that followed that cry, he himself alone can ever know the breadth and length and depth and height. That's it, actually. I just really like that. Wow, that was an abrupt ending. I should put another slide in there, note to self. But for now, that's it. That's all I wanted to say about the Eloi. What are your thoughts on that, actually, that meditation? Was this a divine moment or a human moment? Yeah. Yeah. So it's the key part is here. So in this moment, Jesus actually doesn't feel God. He feels forsaken. I mean, that's why he says, "Why have you forsaken me?" How? Well, I don't know. But let me ask, have you felt forsaken by God? Have you felt he's not there? I don't feel him. I pray and I feel nothing. I have a lot. And I think it is our natural inclination. I think many people, I've heard actually of people who have, for whom doubts have sprung from this feeling of like, I don't even think God is listening to me, right? I don't feel anything. I don't feel like he's answering my prayers. I don't feel like he's there. In this moment, when he's been crucified, this is arguably the worst thing that has happened to any human, right? And yeah, he feels that because he is human. But in that moment, he doesn't think that God is gone. He asks him, "Why aren't you here?" Have you ever asked somebody why they're not there? That makes no sense. Why aren't you here? I'm talking to you. Where are you? Right? He says, "My God, my God." So he's his God and he's there. And he knows he's there even though he cannot feel him there. Does that make more sense? And that's what MacDonald suggests is a lesson to us. So do you guys know that Saint Teresa, Saint Mother Teresa, I think they sainted her, right? The Catholic Church, yeah. Canonized her is the right term. She felt this for decades. She writes in her memoir, or a memoir that was written about her, I don't remember, that for decades her prayers were dry. She did not feel God's presence in her life at all. Mother Teresa. And she just, it was horrible. She felt no affirmation from him at all. She didn't feel like she was talking to anybody. But she knew she was. And she did what she did. She continued to serve the way she did for him for decades. That's faith. And that's what he's talking about here. This moment when Jesus did not feel him, he knew he was there anyway. All right. Thoughts on any of it? On the beard? It does look Russian. He's Scottish. I think, yeah, the beard, that might be why I think he's Orthodox, because of the beard. No, I read his Wikipedia page, which, I mean, obviously it seems pretty legit, I don't know. But he just kind of bounced around, and his theology, again, from what I'm reading, is really, for example, a big tenet of Protestantism, right, is scripture only, sola scriptura, right? The Bible is everything, right? So this is one thing we say, that for Protestants, it's the Bible, the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. And he's like, no, it's Jesus. He's sort of un-Protestantish to me. No, you. No, you. No, you. No. Please, no. All right, ladies first. Yeah, Jesus' divinity and his humanity, and how they can be both there 100% of the time, not separated, blink of an eye. And he's talking to his father. I got to go pray. How many times he's like, everyone's like, hey, everyone's waiting for you. Yeah, I'm out. I'm gonna bounce. Right? That's a good question. I think, okay, well, I'll say the Trinity is a mystery, right? We can't get it, so let's put that aside. But a way that has helped me think about it is that, and this, forget about my language here, right? I'm not trying to, this is probably blasphemy, but it's one, being, right? But it's three kind of personalities or something, right? It's three functions, three personalities. It's three persons, we do say that, right? Three persons in one God. So that's not blasphemy, I'm safe. So I think there are differences among them. They're different. They are the one God, but, the Son is the one who was incarnate, not the Father. The Holy Spirit is the one who descended upon the apostles in the Pentecost, not the Father or the Son. So the Son talks to the Father, and in fact, some early fathers meditate that the relationship among the three of them is akin to, it's a love relationship, and it's this perfect love, and this is because love needs an object, right? Love in a vacuum isn't a thing. So he loves himself first, and then he made us to love, right? Abuna, do you have thoughts?
I agree 100%.
Oh, thank God, because excommunication is always just right there. I'm always kind of walking right up to it.
It's similar to husband and wife.
Yes.
They should have the love between each other, so they will love the idea of having it.
Yeah.
So it's like the same.
Yeah.
If they don't have this between them, it doesn't generate.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. The husband and wife love each other, and then we make this sometimes really weird decision. Not you though. You guys are good. It's others. I'm talking about other people who decide to have kids. I have 3. I'm very happy. No, I actually love them a lot. I know I make fun of them all the time, but they're great. It's just that they're all teenagers, so pray for me. They're pretty good. Yeah, so I think that the only way I can really get my head around the Trinity, and I can't, right, is the idea that there is actually a relationship among 3 persons there. Yeah, so he had a relationship with his Father. They're not the same being. I mean, they're the same being, but they're not the same person. You know what I mean. It's very easy. Yes. One nature. One nature, 3 persons. There were, councils and churches split over this language, so we're not going to solve it now, but yeah. We're the monophysites, right? Miaphysites, yeah. And what was your question?
Also love you. Could this be a way to think about it? That maybe the fulfillment of the incarnation is to remove that separation between God and humanity.
Yeah.
Could we say that by his divine will, he accepted all of human suffering, the greatest of which is that sense of separation?
I love that. You're going to have to say that out. Everyone in the back heard him, right? For sure not. I'm not going to be able to repeat it. I like that. So I think it is true. Tell me your name again. I remember. Mark, yeah, I remember you from the retreats. Yeah. You play an instrument. Oh, okay. Look at her, humble. What Mark is, God, I forgot his name. He just told me. What Mark just said was that, could it be that, and it is, right? We say that the incarnation is, the goal of the incarnation is to remove that separation or bridge that separation between God and man, the separation that we caused, right, with the fall. And that is what the incarnation is there for, right? So in this moment, and in the incarnation, through his will, by the will of the Father, and the will that the Son accepts, he accepts, first of all, being debased and taking human form, and becoming incarnate, and he accepts crucifixion, and he accepts taking on the worst of human suffering, perhaps even the worst of which is this feeling of separation from God that is cried out in this moment. Why have you forsaken me? Maybe this is the worst suffering that we have, feeling forsaken by God. If we really understood our need of him, and if we really felt he wasn't there, that would maybe be the worst of human suffering, right? So in this moment, he embodies this and destroys it. Yeah, I like that. I think you and McDonald would get along. You just have to, yeah. I've tried. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Guys in the back are laughing. Or chatting, texting, playing games. Hi, Marchie and Mina. It looks like confession. Yeah. Huh? I feel like he's confessing to you, though. Abuna, any thoughts?
It's strange. I agree. It's deep.
Yeah.
I think I don't know which one I should comment on, but I think if we have questions, maybe it will be a good chance to talk.
Yeah. Any other? If not, what are we doing on time? How are we doing? We're okay, right? Oh, yeah. We're just about right. All right. What's going on at St. Justina with YA? How's it going? Good? What are they going to do when you guys are in baby mode? Mark, all right. That sounds awesome. Do you want to stop the live stream probably now? Yeah. Oh, thank God. Well, when Yusuf like made that little sound in the beginning, I was like, oh, and I'm like, that's not going to make any sense on the live stream. She's reading a quote and she's like, oh, and then keeps talking. It's whatever. Stranger things have come out of my mouth. Are you guys excited to be all aunties and uncles to baby boy? He's going to have all these babysitters. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm just vamping now. I like the sound of my own voice, really. I have nothing else to say. Thanks, Tony. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mary, for this lovely talk. If you guys don't mind, let's stand up and pray and say a song, and then we'll conclude. Thank you.